Welcome back to your Dream Coach podcast. I'm Shayla Wey. I'm a small business coach, leadership strategist, and really somebody that believes that building a business should help you build a life you love, not take over the one that you already have. And so when we think about what the difference is between where you are right now and the business and the life you dream about, well, it's not more time, it's not more hustle or more strategy, but it often is really simply comes down to what you do every single week. Because here's what I found is that most small business owners don't actually have a revenue problem. They often don't have a marketing problem. They often have a leadership rhythm challenge. They're busy, but not as effective as they could be. They're working, but they're not leading. And the gap between where they are and where they want to be, it's in what great CEOs do consistently that others don't even realize matters. And so in today's episode, I'm breaking down what great CEOs actually do every single week, not from theory, but from what I've seen coaching business owners, leading sales teams, and really building inside high performance environments. And so what I'm going to do is tie this into what I really believe over 2+ decades of leading people is the 3 pillars of building a life and a business that you love. And that's leadership, fulfillment, and growth. Because when you get these weekly rhythms right, you don't just grow a business, you build a life that actually feels as good as it looks. So let's jump in. Well, the first one is I found that CEOs, that any of the high level people that I work with are protecting their thinking time. And that's the leadership aspect that I speak about often on this podcast. Is one of the biggest differences that I've seen is that great CEOs don't just work in their business. They create space to think about their business. And most small business owners, they avoid this completely. They fill every second with doing, reacting, responding. And what I found is that you don't need to create time to think. If you don't create the time to think, you will always stay stuck in that reaction mode. So great CEOs schedule what we call like weekly CEO time, which is really that non-negotiable space to ask what's working, what's not working, where are we going, and what really actually matters now. And this is something that's talked about in the 4-Hour Workweek book. It's also in the book Essentialism. And it's this idea that clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from creating space. Now, from a leadership standpoint, this is where you stop being an operator and you really start being a leader. Now, the second thing is they track the right metrics, the growth piece. And so I've seen this where most business owners either are tracking nothing or they track everything, but they're focusing on the wrong things. Great CEOs track a few key numbers weekly, not vanity metrics, not busy metrics, but metrics that actually drive growth. Things like revenue, cash collected, conversion rates, maybe leads generated, follow-up activity. Because what gets measured gets improved. And this is something that's really emphasized in a book that I reference a lot, Atomic Habits, about tracking how it creates awareness, and awareness drives the behavior change. Now, from a growth perspective, data removes emotion. Instead of saying something like, I feel like it's not working, you can actually say, here's exactly where the breakdown is. And that's how you scale. And this is something I'll bring into a lot of my coaching calls with clients is the idea of facts over feelings, is that we can feel a lot about our, certain parts of our business, but there are certain facts that need to be controlled and measured to actually grow and scale to the next level. And it's really, really, really important in a business to be tracking the key things that we want to drive the business to the next level. Now, the third thing is that high-level CEOs, they coach their people. And this is the combination between leadership and fulfillment. And this is a really big one because great CEOs don't just manage people, they develop people. And what I've learned is that as your business will only grow to the level that your people grow. So every week, great CEOs, they're reviewing performance, they're giving feedback, recognizing wins, coaching through challenges, because people don't just need more instructions. They really, really do need more leadership. Now, this aligns with principles from a really awesome book that's called Leaders Eat Last. And it talks about this concept of how great leaders create environments where people feel supported, they feel seen, they feel challenged. And from a fulfillment standpoint, this is where business becomes really meaningful because you're not just hitting numbers, you're changing people. And I remember early in my leadership years is one of the biggest compliments that I remember getting was being able to develop people that grew to my level. And I know that some people can sometimes struggle with having people that get to be as good as they are in a role, but that truly is one of the biggest compliments you can get as a CEO and as a leader is to develop people that are at your skill level, because you can scale to the next level when you have a really solid group of people around you. The other thing that I see really successful CEOs do is they review wins. And that's really the fulfillment piece. And this one I feel is massively overlooked. And what I see a lot is that most business owners just move from one goal to the next without really ever acknowledging the progress. But great CEOs, they build in weekly reflection on wins. Because this is what I've seen is that if we don't recognize our progress, we will always feel behind. And this ties into a really fantastic book called The Gap and the Gain, where measuring ourselves against where you started, not always just where we want to go. And so weekly questions that I've seen some really great CEOs that I work with ask is one is, well, what did we do really well this week? You know, our minds are very negatively wired naturally to protect us. And so it's very easy without training our minds to look at what's not working in the business. What isn't going well? Where are we not there? Why are we not there yet? So when we start from a place of, well, what do we feel like have been some really positive moves this last week? Where did we win? Who showed up powerfully? That starts to naturally create a mindset to look for things that are going well so that we can love what we do, so that our team can start to look for the good. And yes, we obviously still need to look at things that can get better and where we can move the needle. But what we focus on grows. And so if we focus on wins, we focus on celebrating areas that are going well, chances are that's going to multiply and build some really solid momentum. And this is actually how you enjoy the journey, right? I mean, we spend a lot of hours and a lot of days and a lot of weeks and a lot of years in our careers. And so why do we want to run meetings and, looking at all the things that are not working day to day when we really can feel fulfilled throughout the journey of focusing on what's working and where we want to go to take things to the next level? The fifth thing that I've seen CEOs do is they really address problems immediately. And that again ties into strong leadership. Is average leaders, and I remember being there, avoid problems. Great CEOs move toward them, right? I remember one of the biggest things that I learned as a leader growing in my career is that leaders ask the questions most people don't want to know the answers to. And I remember exactly that lesson of avoiding things or trying to work around them. And one of my mentors said to me, Shayla, the best leaders ask the questions they don't always want the answers to. And so by just hitting the nail on the head, by working towards it, we really so strong leadership, because problems don't get better with time. They get more expensive. And so every week, great CEOs are asking what's broken, what's unclear, what's not working in this business, where's there friction? And when they act fast, okay, this is something that's really emphasized in high performance culture teams that don't wait for action to be done, right? When you look at any culture or teams that are high performance, they're able to act fast. And again, that is that leadership standpoint, because speed is power. If we let our teams struggle in a space and we're ignoring things and we're not actually addressing them, it can get toxic pretty quickly. And so addressing those and asking those questions is really powerful as a leader. The sixth thing that I've seen is that high-level CEOs, they simplify. And that is the growth piece, because most businesses are not struggling because they need more. They're often struggling because they're doing too much. And so growth comes from simplifying and not overcomplicating. And sometimes this is challenging when we're trying to expand and to grow. But every week, great CEOs are cutting unnecessary offers or complicated processes. Sometimes it's even just the low impact tasks. And again, what is essential in our business? Because sometimes less becomes more. We're focusing energy into what is going to grow the business. And so having something weekly that is making you as a CEO and a leader look at what is unnecessary right now that's happening that isn't really driving and growing the business to the next level. And just simplifying, simplicity can often scale. from that growth perspective. Now, the seventh thing is that I've seen is that high-level CEOs, they stay close to sales. Okay. And this again is going to tie into the growth. It doesn't matter what business you're leading or what business you own, everything is sales. Whether you're selling an idea, a service, a product, yourself, right? We are selling when we're in business. And even at high levels, great CEOs never disconnect from sales because sales is the heartbeat of your business. And so every week, high level CEOs, they're reviewing numbers. They're looking into different parts of the business that need maybe some attention or fine tuning, because if the sales are not moving in the right direction, we don't have a business. Okay. And so every week, top level CEOs don't ever move past looking at numbers. Okay. And this is something, if you follow Alex Hormozi, he talks about constantly, is that founders should stay close to revenue generating activities. So from a growth standpoint, if you lose touch with sales, you lose touch with reality, because the sales really is the needle to everything, behind the scenes in a business. Now, the eighth thing that I've seen CEOs do is they protect their energy. And that is that fulfillment piece, because this is where most people get it wrong. They think great CEOs just outwork everybody. But here's what I've actually seen. Being a CEO myself of my own business, also being in high-level leadership roles, working with high-level executives, coaching some very successful people, is that great CEOs manage energy, not just their time. And so they prioritize their health, movement, mental space, and boundaries. And that is something that a lot of times people think just goes to the wayside and they're just outworking. When if you talk to any person in a high-level role, they will have high boundaries. They'll have their workouts in. They will have all of those key things mapped out, because health is so key to building wealth, especially when you are in a high-level role like a CEO. And your business really should support your life, not consume it. Are we working to live, or are we living to work? And that's sometimes a big boundary decipher that we can implement to get clear on where our boundaries and where our time is being spent. Number 9 is that they reconnect to the vision. Leadership and fulfillment is really where this pulls together here, because every single week, great CEOs are reconnecting why they're doing this. Because without a vision, you will burn out, even if you're successful financially. And so CEOs ask themselves, where are we going? Why does this matter? And then who am I bringing, who am I becoming along the way? We never arrive as a leader. We're always growing, because you've probably heard that phrase, if we're not growing, we're dying. And so we want to make sure that we are, as we grow, as our business continues to scale, is what is it for? And I think it's very common for whys, right? The why we start something to shift and change as we go through different seasons and different decades, as a leader. And there's a phenomenal book, if you need to reconnect with your why and just be inspired, that is called Start With Why, that I highly recommend. And the 10th one is they decide and they move. CEOs make decisions, and they make them fast, not reckless, but decisive, because indecision is one of the most expensive habits in business. When we just gather information, okay, and we just sit on it and we don't take action, it's an expensive place to be. So high-level CEOs gather information, they trust themselves, and they move and they take action, right? So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I've been working hard, but I'm not seeing the results that I want, this might be your shift. Not more hustle, not more content, not more ideas, but better weekly rhythm in the leadership. Because your business can only grow to the level that you lead it. And if you want support building these systems, I invite you to join the LFG Business Academy on Skool. It's completely free. Inside, you will gain some of my frameworks around leadership, fulfillment, and growth, and tools that you can actually implement from things that we talked about today. Because information is great, but implementation is what changes your life. So thank you so much for being here. Remember that your dream life starts with the way that you lead, the way that you live, and the way that you grow. I'll see you next time on your Dream Coach podcast.